we're all embarrassed and we all got hoodwinked, like every single person. But I find it really empowering to actually admit all the stupid mistakes and admit that he fed me the most ridiculous lines and I just kept letting him be part of our lives.
From Mamma Mia, I'm Mia Friedman and you're listening to No Filter, candid conversations that count. The first time Bec Rosen met Hamish McLaren, she thought he was a bit of a tosser, really. Bec was a single mum. She'd just ended a bad marriage and along with her 3 young sons, she'd moved to Blueys Beach on the New South Wales North Coast. Bec and her boys were in the early stages of rebuilding their lives when Hamish appeared and inserted himself into their world by being kind and helpful. He started showing an interest in their family. He took her son surfing. He was always around to lend a hand when Bec needed one. Pretty soon, the friendship turned into dating, and in 2011, Bec and Hamish got married. That was when Bec started to uncover the extraordinary lies that her husband was telling and the twisted secrets he was keeping from her and her boys. If you listen to the podcast Who the Hell is Hamish, you probably already know a bit about Hamish McLaren, or Hamish Watson, or Max, or some of the other names he used. But if you don't, let me fill you in. You see, Hamish McLaren was a con man who took more than $7 million from 15 separate victims, and they're just the ones we know about. Some of those victims were famous, like Australian fashion designer Lisa Ho, and a lot of them were battlers and pensioners who lost their life savings. And some were women that he was dating, or in the case of Bec, married to. In the lies and stories that he spun to his victims, Hamish pretended to be a barrister, a Harvard graduate, a survivor of September 11, a twin who'd accidentally killed his brother, a fund manager, and a friend of Tom Cruise. It was all bollocks, of course, but his lies were so elaborate and so convincingly told that many of his victims, like Bec, didn't stand a chance. So what do you do when you realise you've married a con man? How do you get over the fact that your husband has been sleeping with your son's girlfriend for years? What about when you discover you have hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt in your name because your signature was forged? All of this happened to Bec Rosen, and she's lived through it. And just a warning, this is an adult conversation with some adult language, so if you have little ears around, be warned. Here's Bec. So many people who have listened to your story just said that the word gaslighting just came through their head. Gaslighting, gaslighting, gaslighting. Everyone was telling you, or he was telling you, you're crazy, you're crazy, you're crazy, you're crazy.
Everyone was telling me.
The therapist was saying, you're crazy. Jane, your son's girlfriend, you're crazy. Everyone was saying you're crazy. Yeah.
My kids.
You're not crazy. You have never been crazy, and your instincts have always been spot on.
Which is such a learning lesson. And it was so difficult because I knew in my gut I was right.
Yeah.
But I was on this knife's edge because I had the boys and I couldn't create this massive blow-up disaster because they'd already been through enough with my first marriage. And I think the whole time I kept thinking, I'm going to be able to show them and I'm going to be able to work this out, but I have to do it in a way that's not going to just completely blow up their whole world in 1 second.
And you didn't want to be right, did you?
Not really.
It would have been awesome to be wrong in that case. Not to be crazy, but...
It would have been so good to be wrong.
Yeah.
But I knew I wasn't wrong.
Tell me about your life right before you met Hamish, right before he walked into it.
Well, the kids and I had lived in Singapore for 7 years with my ex-husband, and he, unfortunately, was the absolute love of my life, but had a big problem with alcohol and violence and cheating. So we'd sort of got through a few of those things and, he'd had time in rehab, we'd gone to counselling, I'd forgiven him about some of the women and we were trying to work together, but it would always slip back into a disaster. And I remember being at a counsellor, this great woman in Singapore, I can't remember her name, I wish I could, and she said to me, Bec, you're a mother of 3 boys, right? And I said, yeah. And, they were 11, 5 and 2 or something. And she said, do you want your boys to think that this is a normal relationship? This is what a marriage looks like? And I went, absolutely no way. Because I was thinking, I'm trying to do every step I can to make this all okay. And she said, you need to get them and get out. And literally, I left that session, walked out, called my dad, and we were on a plane in like 3 days. So I left thinking, we're just going to go to Blueys, because I'd grown up there since I was 2, we'd been holidaying there. And we had this little holiday house there, and I rang and said to Dad, look, can we just rent it for a year and I'll just work out what I'm going to do?
Fresh start.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It's a really simple life. There's a cute little primary school. And
So it's like a small coastal town in New South Wales by the beach.
Yeah, everyone knows everyone, you know. The postman will come and find you if you're not home to give you your letter. And my really old girlfriend and her partner had bought a business like 3 months before I moved there.
And what year was this?
So I moved there in January 2008. And
so the kids were getting settled in school.
Yep, Jack started high school. That was a bit scary because going from a really nice school in Singapore to Foster High.
Were you working?
Yes, so they employed me. So they've got a bottle shop and deli, so I was just working there.
Your friends?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm still there. They've got 2 shops now and I'm the manager, but, you know, it's awesome. It's a beautiful shop.
Tell me about the day you met Hamish.
I just used to see him around and he had this beautiful girlfriend, Letitia. And I used to look at her and go, what are you doing with that guy? Like, that's weird. And she worked in a cafe down the road. And so we used to chat and she'd sort of talk about Hamish and how he was a futures trader.
What did he look like?
Fat, chubby, shaved head, stubble, always wearing sort of just like singlets and board shorts and
attractive?
thongs. Not at all. No, not at all. That's why I kept thinking, why is that amazing woman which is...
Yeah, right. So just like a kind of a fading, surfy
like
sort
a
of
fading,
a dude.
surfy dude. And that's all he'd do is go surfing. He was really observant. He'd watch people. I noticed that. Like he'd say things to me like he'd notice some random thing about my car and ask me it. Or just like, you know those rubber strips that are on the back of, I don't know, they're meant to stop static or something on the road. I didn't even know I had one. But he'd notice stuff like that and come and go, hey, why have you got that? You know, just little weird things. And then he started coming into the cafe and we were doing bacon and eggs rolls and stuff at that stage. And he used to just be the most annoying customer, like really particular. Burnt bacon, egg has to be rock hard, no salt, you know, like all these things. And so we'd all stand there and go, oh, here comes that dickhead. And we'd all roll our eyes and start burning the bacon. And I can remember one time he was there and I got the egg off the stove and I went to flick it on the burger and it landed on the ground. So I just scooped it up off the ground and put it on his burger. We still laugh about that. So he started hanging around a bit. We'd have chats because it's a little community. Then he started whinging about Letitia. And I think pretty straight away I went, mate, I don't want to know.
What was he whinging about?
Like he says about every ex-girlfriend, she's got a drinking problem, she takes heaps of drugs, which was so untrue. This girl was an athlete, played league tag and all sorts of things. I can't stand how she smokes. She loses her temper every 5 minutes. Just, it's quite funny. A lot of men like to whinge about their wives or partners to other women, which I just find so unattractive.
Do you see now, looking back, that was part of the way he would sow doubts about someone's credibility?
Absolutely.
With the drinking?
Oh, my God. You should hear the stories I've heard about me.
Yeah.
I was a drug addict and the kids didn't want to live with me. I'm a full-blown alcoholic.
Because it becomes hard to deny something like that, doesn't it? Because if you deny it, well, you deny it if it was true and you deny it if it wasn't true.
Yeah.
So,
and people don't, it's funny because people don't tell you because he's so good at keeping everyone separate. So he'd said all this stuff about Letitia and then I remember him going, we'd become friends and I knew the guy he worked with.
What was he doing as a stockbroker?
Yeah, he said he was a hedge fund trader.
One of those things that nobody really understands what that means.
Who knows, big screens with the graphs and he'd just sit and stare at it. Now I think, how boring, because he wasn't actually doing anything. What was he thinking? Just staring at a screen for hours. But I remember Letitia was going up and down to Sydney and things weren't great. And I was just really just in the bubble of the boys. And I think, as I said, he had spotted them because they'd get off the bus and they'd come and sit and I'd make milkshakes for them or whatever and, you know, they'd go home and get the dogs and bring them down because I was just, I couldn't walk to work. So it was a perfect situation for us. And it was just really cute. We were just all happy and regrouping. And then he'd start going, hey, do you want to come for a surf? And so they knew that I didn't like him because I'd go home from work and we'd laugh about him. And I'd go, ugh, that annoying guy came in today again and he just thinks he's so good. And we used to laugh about him all the time. But then he just did stuff, sort of started being really interested in the boys, even probably more so than me. So I'd see them sitting outside with him and they weren't inside running at me, wanting my attention. You know, and stuff like I remember one time I was at work and it was super busy and the boys were being stupid and they'd ridden their bikes down the street and one of them stood on the front handlebars and went face first. So they all run down in a line, the three of them, and the last one's, he was like 6 when it happened and his front tooth's like hanging out of his head and there's gravel off his gums. And I was at work and there was nobody else there and I couldn't do anything. And suddenly Hamish is there and just swoops in, picks Levi up, you know, takes him straight into the doctor and then to the dentist and just kind of does the saviour thing. You know, wanted to know, would always ask me about my life and be horrified at, you know, what I'd been through. And I'd lived with my ex-husband saying, stop playing the victim. You know, you're such a victim. Look at you.
So Hamish was interested in you and interested in your story.
Yeah. Also was interested in the fact that before I left, we'd opened a business over there. Also was interested in what are you going to do about a divorce settlement with the kids and pushing me for sort of divorce. And I was like, look, we didn't really have money. All the money's put into the business. I don't want anything. I want the kids. I don't care, you know. And he kept saying, you really should think about it, Bec. I mean, what about a better education? I'm going to make an appointment. And he took me to some solicitor in Sydney that I just felt so uncomfortable with.
So he came in and he was the good guy between you and your ex-husband and he was the mediator.
Yeah.
And he picked up all the emotional labour of that, I guess.
Love the emotional labour episode. I've used that term about 20 times in the last week.
Because that's seductive for a woman, isn't it, when a guy comes along and says, hey, I'll take the kid to the dentist, I'll fix this, I'll do that, all that stuff as a single mother that you are used to having to handle on your own. That must have been an enormous relief.
Enormous. And someone who seemed to genuinely care and someone who had your back and just was like, you know, you didn't deserve any of this. The boys didn't deserve this, you know. So that happened, and around the end of 2008, things between him and Letitia had just really fallen apart.
Looking back with what you know now, compulsive liars can't help but lie. I mean, they lie about inconsequential things like what they ate for breakfast.
Yeah.
And then pathological liars and psychopaths and sociopaths lie for a reason. Yeah, for a reason and to manipulate the situation. Which kind of lies did Hamish's tend to fall into? Both?
Both.
Right.
I think
that must do a number on your head.
Like I said, you know, he would lie about exactly inconsequential, really stupid things, but things that always made him sound a little better than he was.
What were some of the things he told you about his own past?
Oh, well, first of all, they lived in New Zealand, which is true. I mean, his mother had an affair. His father killed the guy that his mother had an affair with. They then fled New Zealand and moved to Avalon. He was then born. He's quite a bit younger than he must be about 12 years younger than his older sister. His mum was not in a good place and was not a good mother to him, didn't understand him.
This is all according to him?
All according to him. His father was in the army and really strict and wanted Hamish to be really a man and really manly, and he never felt like he could make his father proud of him. But he loved surfing, he loved Avalon. Then they were going to move away, and because he didn't want to leave Avalon, or he says he got kicked out of home at 16 and had to go and live with other people, which he did do. I don't think he was kicked out of home. And it's funny because I do talk to his sisters, or I have over the years, about childhood. And it wasn't that.
None of that was true?
No.
When did it become romantic?
So it's the end of 2008. And I was starting to think, look, he's a nice guy. Look, maybe, you know, who knows? So he rang me and said, yep, she's gone. It's completely over. Do you want to go to the movies? And I said, yeah, sure. And we went to James Bond, which just... Because he absolutely idolises Daniel Craig. But at the time I didn't know. And that led to actually him telling me other stories about when we were first together, he worked for MI5. And he,
Really?
Yeah. So because of his big army history, he'd done things like worked for the special forces in the army, he told me, and done missions like for training they would drop them out in the middle of a desert with a sack over their head and a bottle of water, and you had to get 100 kilometres back to base, and he'd done it, and, you know, he was really, really good with weapons and, anyway, all this stuff. So
He made up this completely fake life.
Yeah.
What's interesting about the stories that he told about his past, though, is that they were very specific and they were very big. Like, you would think that you would sort of say things that were a bit more low-key.
So that it's not as big a clanger.
Yeah. Did it almost make it easier to believe because it was so over the top? And you'd think, who could make that up?
Well, I kind of didn't believe him. But I didn't believe him, but what I thought was, I just think maybe he's trying to impress me.
Yeah, right.
And I thought, wow, you know, stupidly. And I thought, okay, so he can say all of that and it might not be true, but that's his story. It's not hurting me. It's what his imagined story of his life is and how he explains where he is right now.
Did you ever Google him?
Yeah, because he knew I would Google him. So I saw all of that, and it's always that silly thing they always talk about, Gabrielle Richens, the pleasure machine.
Yes, that
Who is
came
she?
up. Gabrielle Richens, the pleasure machine. She was like a sexy kind of model,
Yeah, I saw
but
the
like
eyebrows.
glamour sort of model. Not an editorial model particularly. And I seem to remember she was with some high-profile footballer. And either his relationship or his marriage ended and he sort of ran off to be with her.
Wow. And how did she end up with Hamish?
I don't know.
I
So he would
remember
talk about her.
He would talk about her, and he would talk about her mother. And apparently she and her mother lived with him in Palm Beach. But again, Gabrielle was a raging alcoholic and, you know, would throw scotch glasses at him and stuff.
According to him.
According to him.
Wow,
which, of
he
course,
seems every single woman that he dated turned out to be an alcoholic and an
know.
unreliable witness.
Yeah, I know. And
So when you Googled him and you found reams of stuff about dodgy business dealings in Canada and people saying he'd stolen millions of dollars,
yeah.
this is still in the early stages.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Well, I thought, because he'd said, I'm going to tell you because you'll Google me. And so he'd given me the backstory. I Googled it and went, I thought, well, he's not in jail. He hasn't been arrested. Like maybe what he's saying is true. Because if you do all this really bad stuff, how is he walking around Blueys Beach? But in saying that, his older sister is best friends with my older sister, which is just this weird connection. And I had never put that together until we started seeing each other, because my older sister Ruth, who's 60, her best friend from having little kids was this woman, Penny Janu. So I knew Penny, but I didn't realise.
That must have made you feel more secure as well.
It did.
Because he was oriented in your world.
Yeah, it did. And although my sister had said, Penny said, be really careful, you know, be really careful, Bec. And I said, yeah, I get it. But I think that you're right, that I had never thought about that, the fact that because he was already somehow a part of my family in a way, it made me feel safer maybe. I don't know.
So was it quite whirlwind? I mean, he
Yes,
obviously
yes.
did a number on you in terms of interest in the boys, lightening your load. Was it like this passionate, hot and heavy thing?
Absolutely not. And the weirdest thing is I'll never forget, so the first night we'd done the James Bond thing, and then we get home and I'm like, okay, let's get the wine and see what happens. Because I think, you know, you've got to
You're
go
grown up.
there. Yeah. And we were sort of kissing and it was not very nice, to be honest, but I kind of was trying to move it to basically have sex with him just to see. You've got to test the water. But he wouldn't. He said the weirdest thing. He said, if I have sex with you, I will own you. And I remember, I still don't understand what that was about. But he said, I want you to make sure you want to be with me before we do that. I mean, what guy does that?
Oh, the
Anyway,
mind games.
so then I start going, And he'd go, I've got to go because, I don't want to do this. Don't want to do this. You just need to know that you are mine. And
That's quite manipulative too, isn't it?
well, I'm thinking it's just so strange. I mean, who
turns down sex with a hot girl?
Well, yeah, and if we're thinking we're going to be in take this forward, so he moved quite slowly, sort of infiltrating my little unit. And I wasn't particularly attracted to him physically at all. But I didn't care. It was like...
You liked the person that he was.
Yeah.
That you thought he was.
That I thought he was. And that's never been a thing for me. I mean, my ex-husband's the hairiest man I've ever seen, and people would probably think he's quite gross, but I was just so in love with him.
When did you finally sleep together?
Oh, I think it took about 7 weeks or something after that, so it would have been around New Year-y time.
And was it amazing?
It was probably about 3 minutes. He had to have a shower first.
Oh.
He even told me, how weird's this? He used to say, I like to peroxide my penis.
What?
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
I don't
put
even
your
know.
Penis in peroxide, it'd fall
Could you
off.
Could you put dab it on a...
I don't think so.
But I don't know. And I'm thinking, is that because you're worried about me? Or is that it was
sexy.
really weird. He's never had his hand inside my underpants, ever.
So he never touched you?
Never. He'd touch my boobs, which I was always a bit conscious of because I've fed 3 kids. You know what it's like.
I do.
And they're not fabulous.
I really do.
Yeah, exactly.
Wind socks.
Yeah. It's bad, isn't it?
Can be.
But I'm just embracing that. I don't care.
Of course.
But
they've done good things, our boobs.
They have done great things. I'm so proud of them. Every scar and one longer than the other. But I don't think he was into women. I've always said that. And as he turned into this freaky character, this whole other person that I don't recognise, I look at photos and go, that's a gay man. The people he idolised were men. He never talked about women, although I have learnt that he was having a lot of flings in Potts Point with people, and he was sleeping with Jane. But no, he definitely wasn't, he wouldn't come and grab me and want to rip your clothes off or anything. If we had sex, it would be, we'd had a few wines, we'd go to bed, it'd be like he would never want to look at you. He'd be behind me. And I can remember just going, this is just the worst. And at one stage, in the early days, I thought, you know what, Bec, suck it up. You're taking one for the team because this is a family and this could be really good for us. And I thought, if I've got to just give up having sex to create something secure,
sex.
Yeah.
And that can really affect your self-esteem.
Well, he did used to always tell me, if you tried, you could look pretty good. All the time. And that was a really awful thing for me. It made me feel like that's when I started feeling like I was losing the grip on my kids as well because, it was so important to me to raise 3 men that are feminists.
Yeah.
And just decent people.
And he'd say that in front of the boys.
All the time. And then he would convince them and they would go, it's true, Mum. Honestly, because I just do no exercise. I walk the dogs. But I'm not the type of person who wants to go to the gym and, I don't know, do sit-ups before bed.
But because people can't see you, I just have to say, you'd be, a size 6? You're
I don't
tiny.
even know.
You're teeny-weeny.
Well, I think maybe I had put on a bit of weight. But, I was never a big girl.
And regardless of what size you were, any man that says that to you is not a good man.
Yeah, and I used to say, but hey, I'm 40, in my 40s. I've had 3 children. I'm doing all right. And then he would name supermodels who had children.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and he would push me to go, come on, we'll go for a run. He gave me a bikini for Christmas saying it was incentive for me to get.
There's a gap here because you say when you met him, he was overweight, he was not really interested in clothes or his appearance. And then you referred to a time when he sort of made himself over. That was after you got together?
Yeah. So we got together and when we got married in 2010, we didn't have any money. We were sort of scraping together to do a little wedding on the veranda and have a reception. And it wasn't like he was, I thought, this guy's loaded. This is going to be awesome. I just thought, this guy just wants this simple life like I do. He's doing his thing. Business seems to be doing a little bit better. He goes surfing all the time. I love it. But when he started working for Lisa Ho, he started getting really into his body and working out and being paleo, and it just, because he was always into his fitness, but it was more boxing, so he had that body of like a, you know how they're sort of chunky?
And surfers, usually have quite athletic bodies.
He was big, but he wasn't ever like he would be embarrassed at the beach in the beginning to be shirtless. Like he'd get his wetsuit off and have a towel. And I thought, that's just the sweetest thing, because I don't care what you look like. I care how cute. Like, I mean, I get shy because, tummy that's had babies, and I'd be like that. But I thought, so is he. Like,
but then he changed.
He changed, and he was doing a lot of work in Sydney, a lot of work with Lisa Ho. He was coming back with these stupid cars. Like, he had a ute when I met him, just an old ute.
Over what period of time did this happen?
It was like 12 months. So
wow.
hang on,
so
no.
Fast.
Actually, not. It would have been. So we got married in 2010. Yeah, it was like within 12 months.
Tell me about the decision to get married.
Do you know, it's a funny thing. I remember he just really wanted to do it, and he kept pushing me I hadn't even got divorced. And I felt maybe he just loves us so much, and he so craves the security of a unit, and we can do this. Like,
why do you think you really wanted to get married?
Me?
Yeah.
Because I wanted security. I wanted a family. All I ever wanted was just a unit. I wanted the boys to have a male in their life and be able to do the things I can't do.
And he was great with them, right?
He was great with them.
In hindsight going, well, he said these awful things and whatever, but he also groomed you. How did he do that? How did he make you love him?
Through the kids, absolutely. And through just always telling me what an incredible mother I was. Like, what a great cook. We would have dinners. It was all about family. We never went anywhere without them. We would go anywhere we would go holidays. It would just be going to the snow, and he would spend hours on the runs with the kids. I'd be back at the place making sandwiches, and I just kind of thought, this is good. Like, I knew I wasn't in love, but I thought, maybe this is what it is now. Maybe this is where life goes. And
so it was a pretty pragmatic decision to get married in a way.
Yeah. But and I say that now, but like my girlfriend Tori always goes, Bec, you were stoked. And I was. And I remember saying, someone going, what are you doing? And I was like, well, what have I got to lose? Like, because I kind of thought, what have I got to lose? So it doesn't work out, whatever. I had no idea that if only I could take those words back and not have almost destroyed my children's lives.
When did he start trying to take your money?
Straight after we got married, because I didn't have any money. So he'd started with trying to get a divorce settlement, which never eventuated. So then he moved on to the house, which was my parents'. It's their holiday house. And he was doing well with Lisa Ho, and we were making some money. Saying making money, we never had a joint account or anything. I just had my account. He'd put money in every month for housekeeping, and he just did his business stuff. No idea. He said, I've got a big bonus. Let's go talk to Mal and Sheila about buying the house. And I was so excited.
Your parents?
Yeah. I was so excited because I thought, it's all I've ever wanted, and maybe this can happen. And so we had this lunch, and like my dad he'll be 90 this year. So he was 80, so he's still elderly, but he's a really smart cookie. And he let Hamish do the spiel, and Hamish is just so good at talking. It was all about Malcolm and Sheila. I want to give this to Bec and the boys. I want them to have the security. And I'm sitting there looking at him going, oh, I'm so in love. This is so great. And they said, we're going to go away and think about it. They then Dad called me and said, look, we just don't feel comfortable about this at the moment.
But he was going to give them money. Is that what he was saying? Or there was a catch? There's always a catch.
Well, I don't know. He was going to buy the house because he had some massive bonus. So he wanted to buy the house from them. So he would have given them cash and then we would have had a small mortgage.
Why did your parents say no?
Because they're not stupid. Because they knew. Like, he said to me in retrospect, Bec, over my dead body was I going to do that. They knew. And, I mean, that's this really incredibly hard thing about being a parent, because in some ways, you know, I can say, why didn't you? And I've said it to girlfriends, grab me and shake me. But you can't, because that might have then completely changed my relationship with my parents. And at that stage, I would have probably backed Hamish.
And it happens by degrees, doesn't it?
Happens by degrees, very slowly. And the same thing with my girlfriend. She said, you know, we wouldn't be friends now. You would have just told me to fuck off. And I would have.
What else did he try to take?
I think that was when I noticed once he didn't get that, he knew he wasn't going to get anything from me. So that's when he started talking to Jack's girlfriend's grandparents.
So your eldest son's girlfriend, Jane, lived in the house with you.
Yeah.
That's not her real name, but that's the name that you've chosen to give her.
Yeah.
She was living in the house. She had a dysfunctional family life, so you'd sort of taken her in as a surrogate daughter in a way.
Yeah,
she was 15.
She was 15 when they were dating. It was cute. She has a great stepdad that I'm good friends with, but she was a rough time, really rough.
She had a rough time, so you provided a stable house.
Yeah, it was like playing Happy Families.
And so was she already living in your house when you met Hamish?
No, we got married before she entered the picture.
And then she moved in. And when did you first start feeling uncomfortable about his relationship with her, your son's girlfriend?
Probably when they were in, so she was in year 10 when they got together, in year 11. So
she was, what, 17, 16, 17?
17. So she would be, you know, Jack and her were just in love. So they're just like in La La Land and all over each other. And they'd come up for breakfast in the morning and she wouldn't have much on, just like a girl would be hanging around with their family. Yeah, and so he'd start doing things like they'd be washing up and he'd like flick her bum with the tea towel and kind of stuff like that. Flirty. And like, it's so bizarre how your body reacts to seeing something like that, like just that. And I just straight away went, that makes me feel some sort of weird thing here and I'm going to have to say something. And so he was doing stuff like that and I'd approach him and go, hey, listen, like, you know how you do that flicking a bum thing? Like, it's just not cool. Like, she's, you know, and he'd go, get over yourself, for fuck's sake, Bec. Like, she's Jack's girlfriend. She's a kid. She's like my daughter. Then they sort of started training and hanging out a lot together. And he'd take her on runs and they'd do triathlons and Jack would be involved too. Like, they're all super fit. I'm so not fit. So they'd all go running together. People would see them out on paddleboards when I was at work and just doing...
So sometimes they'd just be off by themselves, Hamish and Jane?
Often. People would say they'd seen them in the cafe having a coffee together.
And did you say something to your son? Did you say something to him, to her? How do you even handle that?
I started with saying it to Hamish, which of course he's like, yeah, we're just running, like we're whatever. I started saying it to Jack going, hey, are you okay with like the amount of time they're spending together? And he's like, yeah, why wouldn't I be? And so I couldn't go in and go because I think something's going on. Then all the talk of, because she is a super clever girl, super clever. She was school captain year 10, school captain year 12, you know, on every kind of, you know, whatever program at the school. And she was really smart and she wanted to do finance. So that was...
I wonder if that was her idea or his.
I wonder that too now. So this meant that Hamish, who had always told me he'd worked for a guy called and he was very good friends with this guy. This guy had an apartment in the same building in Woolloomooloo. That was another thing that happened during this creation of Hamish's new kind of fancy suit wearing creepy Botox thing.
You got Botox?
Yes, I'll show you after. I've got this photo that I found. It's just his head of what he looked like when I met him in 2008 and a photo that Tracy Hall had given me of what he looked like just before he got arrested.
That's the woman that he sort of tried to scam before he just got arrested.
Max Tavita. She lost all her superannuation. Most gorgeous woman. Love her. Like, that's becoming friends with her and some of the other people has just been this cactus flower of the story.
Bonds forged in fire.
Yeah.
So he had Botox. Did you know that he'd had Botox?
You could tell.
Did you ask him?
Yes.
What
and
did
he'd
he say?
no. And then he'd say, I don't dye my hair. And I'd go, but your hair was grey. And he's like, no, it's just from the sun or some shit. And I'd go to the hairdresser in Potts Point, where I used to go when I was in Sydney, and I'd go, Andrew, come on, what are you doing? He goes, yeah. He used to bring into the hairdresser a picture of Daniel Craig, and he'd want his hair to look like that. And we used to just piss ourselves laughing.
So he was incredibly vain.
So vain, so vain. So he would get ready.
Really different to the guy you met in Blueys.
Like
and fell in
polar
love with.
opposites, yeah, polar opposites. And like I wouldn't be able to give him a hug because it might mess his hair up. Or, you know, so many times I remember just going to, I don't know, the local pizza place, and I'd be sitting on the couch with Birkenstocks and jeans on, and he'd be, don't even know, taking half an hour to get his hair right, or weird.
And what do you think that was about?
I think when he started getting really fit and lost weight, and he had Jane's interest and was in Sydney a lot, I think he realised that perhaps I wasn't what he needed, and I think he was probably getting ready for the next chapter of his life, which was being this guy who lives in Sydney who's super fit and super hot and drives around with cars and possibly has a 17-year-old girlfriend.
You suspected that they were sleeping together.
Yeah.
You confronted everyone. You went to counselling with him. He even managed to convince the counsellor who begged you to stop making these accusations.
Begged.
How did you finally find out that it was true?
Because I was so suspicious, and this was probably one of the lowest times of my life, and so suspicious, and no one would listen. They all just thought, like, Jack, I think, thought I was jealous that he was showing attention to a 17-year-old. But I remember I'd just randomly go and turn up at the apartment in Sydney, and Jane's stuff would be through the apartment. And I'd go, well,
that's a smoking gun.
That's a smoking gun. And he'd go, no, she was here with her sister. They went to a concert. They stayed the night. There's some of her stuff. And I'm like, but there's her hairbrush and her book on my side of the bed. There's her cosy downstairs. And he would just tell me, I was look,
being paranoid.
Get over it. Yeah, you're so paranoid. Get over it. What would he always used to say, why would she be interested in an old guy like me? And I think he almost secretly wanted me to say, because you're so amazing. And, you know, I think he secretly, you know, one time I remember going and opening the dryer and there was like a purple G-string. And I'm like a cotton bonds undies girl. And I was like, what's this? And he went, well, how should I know? And I said,
it's your house.
It's yeah. And he goes, oh, fuck, I don't know. Maybe it was the cleaners. And I'm like, cleaners don't do laundry at your house.
So he was just, every time you caught him in a lie with like absolute evidence, he would just be completely confident.
Yeah, just like, what are you talking about? Have another wine. Get over it. Yeah. And
what did you do about telling your son?
Well, it was interesting because what happened was on the down low in the community. I was just really struggling. Hamish was back and forth to Sydney. What I didn't realise that a lot of community members were aware that this was going on, and kind of people said to me, we wondered if you were okay with it or what was going on. So it was actually Jane's stepfather who rang me and said, Bec, I want to have a little chat with you. Are you home? And I said, yes, I'm home. Come round. And so he came round and he said, look, he said, I've seen you walk around and I'm worried about you because you look like shit. I know things are bad, but you need to know that Hamish has been having an affair with Jane, and it's been going on for a long time. He has come to me and told me that he wants to marry Jane, which of course Jane's stepfather was like, are you fucking nuts? Hamish, you're married to Bec.
And Jane's meant to be going out with Bec's son.
Yeah. And he was furious with his stepdaughter and worried about it because she was being completely groomed and drawn into this just hideous situation. And I remember going, you're fucking kidding. And he goes, yeah, I thought maybe you were okay with it. I've called her grandparents and we've tried, because I can't believe everyone's okay with this. But you need to know this. And I was so grateful. And he said, and she needs to tell you too. So he called her and then she called me.
And told you the truth?
Yeah.
How long had it been going on for?
We don't know for sure. So, I don't know, like a year maybe. On the phone she'd said, she was crying and she was so sorry. That was in February 15. So by the end of 2013, things were not going so well with Jack and Jane, which I was kind of secretly happy about. And I found out she'd gone away for schoolies, there's big dramas in Year 12 and she'd hooked up with someone else. And so I knew that and I couldn't tell Jack so I kind of was getting his friends and going, come on, you got to talk to him because he's going to be heartbroken.
Was she still living in your house?
She was spending a lot more time in Sydney with Hamish, but she was still in the house.
Did you ever think of asking her to leave? I guess you couldn't because then that would be more proof of your paranoia.
Yeah, and Jack would have never spoken to me again.
Oh, Bec.
So you just, it's that thing where you can't...
Stuck.
You can see it all.
Yeah, it's lose-lose for you.
It's lose-lose. And so you just got to write it out and hope that it comes out, which it did. But anyway, Jack and Jane broke up. Jack was devastated, And, it's awful seeing...
Oh, I can't imagine.
Any of your kids heartbroken.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was cool. And then 14 was a really tough year because Hamish was spending a lot more time in Sydney. I was really over him. I was really happy he wasn't up with us. Jane had moved to Sydney after Year 12 and was living in an apartment in Elizabeth Bay.
He made up this whole thing about her...
Oh, the internship.
Interning with this friend of his and she was going to get a scholarship to Princeton.
So that was in Year 11 or 12.
Did she think that was true? Did he tell the same story to her or did they conspire to just, this is a good way to just...
I think she thought it was true, but I think she doubted it because I think when they went, she told me they did do one walkthrough of the university because, that was such a clincher point for me because he'd sort of kept talking about, he's going to give her a scholarship and they would have, conversations with the grandparents and it was all happening and it's so great. And we were sitting having pizza and he goes, I remember Hamish had bought this $100 bottle of red wine and Jack didn't drink. So he'd poured 3 glasses and I'm thinking, fuck off. Like you're not giving a 17-year-old girl $100, like a glass of wine we need to celebrate. The internship's happening. We're going in 3 weeks. She's going with and a chaperone. It's going to be fantastic. And I just got up and walked away because my stomach dropped and I just thought, they're actually going to go travelling together and they're trying to make all of us believe that this is about a scholarship. I remember talking about the scholarship in counselling and I had gone nuts Googling this company and scholarships. There was no such thing as a scholarship that involved taking someone to America and paying for a university education at Princeton. But all of her family were on board and everyone thought it was great. And
meanwhile, he'd taken all her grandparents' life savings.
Yep.
And derailed her whole life because she was a smart kid, right? So she could have done something and gone places. She could have done something
and he used that over her.
To get to her grandparents' money? Because I was like, why did he target her?
Both things, though. He used it to, I reckon, to get to the grandparents' money and then to keep her, by his side because she was frightened that they would lose their money. And, Hamish used to threaten people if you went to the police, you weren't going to get your money back. So I think he desperately wanted Jane because he liked the guy who he idolised and has been his lifelong friend has a partner who's a lot younger than him. And they met on the boardwalk at Bondi and she was rollerblading or something and he was in his 30s and she was 18 or some story. And Hamish just thought that was just the most amazing thing. I remember talking about it in counselling and the professor going, you do realise that's not really an appropriate relation. Yeah. And Hamish didn't get it. He cried. He was so upset that the guy was saying something nasty about who he idolised. So then off they go. I gave him the ultimatum of saying, because he came to me and said, you're never going to guess, I've actually got to go overseas for business. Oh, Yeah. And
He was so brazen. I've got to go overseas at the exact same time that Jane is also going to be overseas.
Yeah. But I'm going to go to China and I might have to pop into San Fran. And I went, you're not going with them. And
Yes,
he
because
said,
China and San Francisco are very close.
yeah, so close. And he's
It's a common stopover.
he used to say China all the time. I'm thinking, what? Anyway.
What did you find out had actually happened on that trip? They just went away together.
They just went away together. They went away together. They had a holiday for 2.5 weeks in New York.
And he admitted to you afterwards, oh, we just ran into each other at LAX. And
that's exactly what he said because I'd given him the ultimatum.
So, Bec, you know, listening to it back, you can't help but wonder, why did you not kick him to the curb? Why did you not say,
really
enough,
hard.
the lies, I've caught you, to someone who doesn't understand
How
the
do you
emotional
explain it?
manipulation? How do you explain how you justified it to yourself?
All I kept thinking was the boys. I kept thinking, I've fucked up before and put them through a shit relationship and they are so damaged. I need to do anything I can to try and not let that happen again. And in saying that, I had been trying to break up with him, like trying to extract myself, but he would beg me. He would get the psychologist to ring me. And
I've read the emails.
the emails. I only read them the other day and I had not thought about them in a long time.
Persuasive. But why? Why do you think
Because I
he
think-
wanted, like, what purpose did you serve at this point?
I think
He couldn't get the house.
couldn't get the house, but all I
He
could...
didn't want to have sex with you.
Yeah, he didn't want to have sex. I think it made him look legitimate. It made him look like a good guy to have taken on a woman with 3 kids. It made him look like a saviour and, you know, and Lisa Ho says it. She said that was one of the reasons she trusted him because she's a single mother herself, like a man who does that. So I think as much as, I mean, there were times he'd just look at me like he despised me. I remember being in the apartment. It was my birthday. My twin sister was there. I went to open a bottle of champagne. He goes, you're just a drunk. Look at you. And sitting on the table were a couple of Zimmerman bags. And I was like, oh, he's got a present. And they were for Jane. He's like, oh, I've just picked them up for Jane. So I think...
Cruelty and the brazenness.
It's pretty...
How did you finally get out of there?
When I found out about Jane, I just went, that's it. We got him on the phone, on speaker, and told him.
Who's we?
The boys and I. Because they were furious because it had been so hard with all of us. You know, it was such a fractured time in the family. And they really didn't like me much. They were like, Mum, stop being so mean to him. You know, stop it, Mum. Like... And if I'd ask him, we'd have an argument and I'd ask him to leave, Jet would cry and go, why are you doing this? Like, why, Mum? And
So he'd made you into the bad guy with your own children.
Yep. And I thought stamping my feet and trying to convince them, and they're too young to understand this stuff, is just going to make it worse. So it was that lose-lose again. It was just like I just got to hang on until I have the courage and the strength to go, fuck this, which was when I found out about Jane and we had the open conversation on the phone and I said, we're on speaker and we've found out blah, blah, blah. And he just denied it all. It's complete bullshit. I said, I want all your shit out. He said, you can pack it up and take it to his house. This is his mate who's got a house up in Blueys as well. And then, you know, we had like, I don't know, a bit more contact after that and then he just cut us. So he completely wasn't coming up to the house at all. I think he came up in December 14. We had Christmas and it was miserable. It was
Did
just
he say goodbye to the boys?
No, he just kept saying to the boys, I'm sorry, your mum's such a freak. And by then the boys were like, Mum's not a freak. Like, we don't want anything to do with you.
How was Jack?
Oh, he was devastated.
What a gut punch for him.
What a gut punch. And
Doubly so. The double betrayal
That was
for
it.
him.
And that was the hardest thing because he's a really gentle kid and watching him go through all of that was so hard. So he'd finished school. He was going to Newcastle, going to uni, which was great. So that was good. But emotionally, I you know, as a mum, you know, I was really worried about him. He was highly anxious And I get anxiety. I
I'm not
was
surprised.
So
I'm anxious just listening to you.
And poor him. And so I found someone for him to talk to. So we did like a while of therapy, and then he'd feel better, and then he'd sort of stop and go back. But honestly, up until doing that, talking to Greg, like having that chance.
Greg
Bearup from The Australian. So
that was a huge decision for Jack to make, to speak to Greg Bearup on the podcast.
Massive, because he didn't want to be involved. And like I told you, when I first he asked me, I didn't know how it all works. And then he came up for that chat, and we sat there for like 5 hours. And Jack walked through because we were getting ready for a party, and Greg said, do you want to have a chat? And he said, oh, no, and he's quite shy. And that was totally fine. I was like, absolutely didn't cross my mind that the boys would be involved in it. But I remember after he heard that episode 3 where I'd spoken, and he rang me and he goes, Mum, I just regret that I didn't talk to Greg. Like, I really regret this. And I said, well, I'm sure, if you want to have a chat, you don't have to interview. If you want to just talk to him, And so I got in contact with Greg, and he just went straight up to Newcastle, and Jack was really nervous.
He came across so well.
Oh.
And did that help him?
Massively. He is like, it's just, he's lighter. He's
speaking it out loud.
And he got to say how he felt. And
did you find the same for you?
Absolutely. Like the strength in a podcast, the strength in being able to tell your story.
Yeah.
And we don't have anything to hide. We're all embarrassed, and we all got hoodwinked, like every single person. But I find it really empowering to actually admit all the stupid mistakes and admit that he fed me the most ridiculous lines, and I just kept letting him be part of our lives. And I think it's important to share that, because if I had my time again, I'd trust my gut. I would work out a different way of handling the children. But it's good to reflect and go, holy fuck, how did I have this incredible guilt about putting the children through that and another really awful time. But then I guess this process, and also sort of looking at how our relationship built in trying to put everything back together, has been massive. Has been resilience 101 with the boys. They're just incredible.
Listening to the podcast, are there a lot of stories that you didn't know and that have surprised you to hear?
Yep. Stacks.
Is it upsetting to hear those stories, or is it there's safety in numbers and there's kind of it wasn't just me? Because you feel stupid, right?
You do feel stupid. It's a kind of weird feeling. There is a bit of that stab of someone not being honest and wanting to be with another woman, that sort of level, even though he didn't really want to be with me. But I think the most interesting thing I've found emotionally thinking about from doing this is that he actually never had any capacity to love me. Realising in my head that whole thing was, he never loved me. There was no emotion. He's incapable of that. That's a weird thing, because I sort of still thought, he loved me, and look, he went off the rails again. That's in a really simplistic way, but I think realising he never did. He never loved me. He needed me to get to the next step. He thought maybe at that time when he was fat, surfy dude, maybe he thought if we could scam a house and we could live there, that'd be good. But then, something always better came along, and it didn't work out like that with me. But he needed me to look like he's supporting a family up the coast. I remember when he was living in Bondi, he'd moved to Bondi. And I said, where in Bondi are you? And he's like, I don't know the address. And I went, well, but you had to get a removalist, didn't you? And he went, look, I don't know the address. I'll draw you a map.
Have another drink, Bec.
Have another drink. It's such a girl thing to want to know stuff like that. Oh. And I said,
wow, gaslighting,
it's such a girl. And I was like, but you're my husband. I need to, anyway. So I found where he lived. And he'd apparently gone overseas for work. And I'd do crazy things, just turn up, because I was finding all these loans. And it was in Knotts Avenue in those white, right on the corner.
Yeah, right on the beach. Right where Harry and Meghan pulled up when they went for their beach
exactly
walk.
there. And I remember finding out and talking to him on the phone. I was like, I went down. I've seen where you live. And he goes, I am working 2 jobs. I life save at Maroubra and at Bondi, all so I can support you two. And this is what you're complaining to me about, that I live in a nice apartment.
How much money did you lose?
I didn't really, nothing really. I'm just lost in the fraudulent stuff he's left me in because I didn't have any money.
So he took loans out in your name?
Yeah, forged my signature. Dad and I spent 2 years. So it's about $450,000 worth of loans that are still...
That you have to untangle?
I have to untangle.
Are you liable for those loans?
Yes. Yep. We've spent 2 years, Dad and I, trawling through them. Because Dad found me a solicitor when I wanted to get divorced that would do it pro bono. So he was kind of helpful and he said to me, I think I'd received one letter with a demand notice for a car and I had no idea what it was about. And he'd suggested get a mail redirection from Hamish's where Hamish is staying in Bondi for anything addressed to you. So we started finding these loans. We'd go down to the Porsche dealership where the loans were taken out and they admitted, they'd witnessed my signature and I wasn't there.
So how are you liable for that?
Because apparently that doesn't matter. Apparently it doesn't matter. One of the cars was the Audi that Jane was driving and I remember calling her going, babe, your car, it's apparently it's mine and it's got all this money owing and we're going to have to sort it out. And she went, I can't afford to pay for that. And then the other cars were ones I hadn't seen. And
what's happened to Jane?
She is up the coast working in a dress shop. And so
she never got her university education.
And it kills me because, and Jack has just completed a degree and Jane just got fucked over massively. And she's like, she just feel like shit. She's so... She always said, I'm not going to let this define my life. Like she got pretty cranky with me in the end because I went through this period of I need to know everything, but she didn't. She'd admitted it and that's all she wanted to do. And when you're a crazy person, when you want to find out.
You're not a crazy person. You're a very reasonable person who wanted to try and unravel all the lies you'd been told over years.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah, isn't it funny how you take that on?
I know.
It's like that becomes your identity. Have you watched Dirty John?
Yes.
How did that feel?
Oh, I felt so, it was great. I was like, yes, I know that. I mean, I'd read stuff about people who have this condition. And, when I was, I'd read things and just go tick, 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 tick.
Psychopaths.
And I don't know, it's funny, we always say, Jack and I always talk about it and go, does that let him off? Does that let him off saying he's a psychopath? But I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. He when I just hear the stories, and there are so many of lives he's just destroyed, I think we were lucky.
With no remorse.
Yeah, and he slept like a baby. Like a baby. He was never anxious.
I always wondered about that. I've always thought the level of stress knowing that you've got all these people chasing you and that you're lying, you've got to keep all these lies straight to all these different people and all these people are after you. How would you sleep at night? How would you cope with that?
Occasionally I'd see him. He would go to bed at 8:30. He'd be asleep. Probably that was to avoid having to
So he didn't seem stressed?
Not at all. Sometimes we both would wake up in the night and roll over and we'd just, like you do, shoot the shit. Oh, I'm thinking this, or what about, and just really relax, and then we'd fall asleep again and I'd wake up and he was just getting up to go for an early morning surf. There was not any... a couple of times I've seen him a bit stressed, but he would make out, and he'd be on the phone and he'd make out clients were so greedy and clients were... they didn't understand what was going on. In fact, one lady who I actually wrote her, someone I knew, wrote her an email saying, you need to back off from Hamish, because I went into full protective wife mode going, listen, maybe you don't understand the way it works. Hamish has explained this to me and everything's okay. This woman got her money back, but that's how good he was, that I felt like I needed to protect him. But when he found out I'd done that, he was furious. He was like, don't you ever contact any...
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Bec, how do you date again?
I just don't. There's no, I'm in my work, it's great because you're out, you're talking to people and it's holiday people, and that's kind of good. That's fine for me. And I've got 2 border collies that are just, I worship, and the boys. And I think I'm a bit of an introvert, really. I'm totally happy to go home and shoot the shit about maths with the boys and have dinner and a wine and go for a walk in the morning and have a swim and go to work.
What about trusting people?
Yeah, I don't think that's really... I don't think I'd ever think that I would be involved with someone like Hamish. I think that situation is so one of a kind. Someone said to me, you must just hate men. And I was like, I love men. I could never hate them because I'm raising 3 of them. And I don't know. And, in my little fishbowl, dating's not really an option. It's either 65-year-olds who invite you to go and get a schnitzel at the recce, which is sweet, or horrible married men that have holiday houses.
Oh.
And families.
We need to get you into a bigger town.
It's terrible. But, I'm really happy.
You seem really happy.
We're in a good place and the boys are good. It's just, I just feel like, and we don't need anyone. So I think that's really important to know. I think I was so needy and I've learnt it's bullshit. You don't need, I'm never going to be a millionaire that would never even matter to me, whether or not I ever get to own my own house, or it just really prioritise what's important, and that's, the most important people in your life. Those guys, they're pretty good.
Well, you're an incredible mother, an incredible woman, and so generous for sharing your story because there are a lot of people out there, whether they were, manipulated by Hamish or other people who will recognise what you say, and their wounds are in the shape of your words, and you'll help a lot of people by telling this story.
I just wish I could just scream to every person whoever questions their intuition, their gut feeling, to just don't listen to it and be strong and follow it and believe in yourself.
Thanks for listening to No Filter. If you want to hear more of Bec's story and see some of the photos that she showed us of Hamish, including some absolutely mind-bending before and afters his transformation, search Hamish Mamma Mia or look for the link in the show notes for this episode. And if you've found yourself in a messy separation, it doesn't have to be as messy as Bec's, but breakups and separations and divorce are really, really hard. You will want to go and listen to our new separation and divorce podcast. It's called, fittingly, The Split. No Filter is produced by Eliza Ratliff. I'm Mia Friedman, and I'll see you on Mamma Mia.